thank you everyone for being here. You've made it through to the last day, so well done to everyone who's kind of still standing. So what will we be talking about today? We're going to be talking about platform as a product, how to delight your developers and deliver value to your customers. This is the agenda. So we're going to start at the start, which is a good place to start. Then we'll talk a bit about the past and the bad old days and what used to happen. Then we're going to talk about the present, what we think of now as current best practices. And then we'll talk a little bit about the future, do a bit of crystal ball gazing and think about what we might look at in the future, and then we'll finish. So let's start at the beginning. I'll start by introducing my amazing co-presenter.
Thank you.
So this is Colin Humphreys. He is the CTO of Cloud at Pivotal.
Thank you very much, Paula. This is Paula Kennedy. She's Senior Director of Platform Services and Education EMEA.
Take it away.
Thank you. So I'm going to be talking to you today about the past, giving the first section of the talk. I'm going to be talking to you about what happened before platform as a product. So what is the problem we're trying to solve with platform as a product? In product management speak, what's the opportunity we've got here? What are we really trying to do? So to cover that, let's think about what happened in the past. Let's think about what happened when things maybe aren't going quite so well. What were the bad old days like? Let's think about a typical enterprise. So in a typical enterprise, we have a team working in a line of business. Now that line of business are trying to make some money. They're trying to make money for the enterprise. They are trying to deliver net new value for that enterprise. So they are trying to get an application into production to deliver some value to their customers so they can make some money. But in order to do that, in order to get their idea into production so that it can make money, they need a production-ready environment to host their application. And where do they get that from? Well, they get that from the IT services team inside the enterprise. The IT services team are there to provide the infrastructure, the platform to host and run the application from the line of business. And obviously, for the people in the IT services team, their life is fantastic. Their life is great. Well, unfortunately not. Their life largely looks like answering tickets and getting blamed when things go wrong. So typically, these people are scared. These people are incentivized to say no. And I speak from personal experience here because when I've been in the IT services team in enterprises, I've been scared and I've been incentivized to say no. Because change is scary. Change is difficult. Change can break things. So we're incentivized to say no on that team. And the interaction between these two groups typically looks like tickets. We have a flow of tickets from line of business to IT services asking for things. Now, this typical interaction looks like somebody in the line of business has an amazing idea which they want to get into production. So they raise a ticket saying, hi, I need a production environment. I need some servers on which to host my amazing new application. So about 3 weeks later, somebody in the IT services team looks at that ticket and says, okay, starts replying, we're going to make you a production environment. If you wait for a bit, we'll come back to you a bit later and we'll give you your production environment. So a few months later, they reply to the ticket. IT services team say, hi, here's your production environment. The person in the line of business thinks, fantastic. I've been working on my app for ages, and now I can actually get it into production. They try to SSH into the production environment to deploy their application. They can't access it. Something's wrong. They raise another ticket saying, hi, thank you for my production environment. Unfortunately, it looks like SSH connectivity is blocked. Can you please open this so I can actually deploy my application? Another 3 weeks elapses. As we know, the IT service team take 3 weeks to answer tickets. They look in the ticket. Oh no, panic on the IT services team. I haven't opened the SSH access. Quickly, log straight into the production firewall, open SSH access. Phew, respond to the ticket. Hi, I've opened SSH access, it's fine, you can now deploy your application. Unfortunately, the IT services team person did this manually, did this in a rush, accidentally opened SSH access for everything across the entire environment, and a bunch of servers got hacked. Now, I can see many of you in the audience looking at me and saying, Colin, you absolute liar, that never happened. No one's ever done that. Well, I did that. I did that, and a bunch of servers got hacked. So I can say, canonically, that absolutely happened. In fact, I've done worse than that. Let me tell you a little story about the UK's largest insurance company when we had exactly this scenario happening. Somebody, a very smart person in the line of business, had an idea for this most utterly incredible insurance experience they were going to deliver that was going to revolutionize how people buy insurance. This thing was going to be great. It was going to be amazing. So, pardon me, they had a chat. They opened some tickets for all the things that they needed from the IT services team, of which I was a member. So we thought, on the IT services team, we can do this. We are going to build the best possible infrastructure. It was going to be awesome. We ordered a whole bunch of Sun hardware, Spark CPUs, running Solaris. We put Solaris cluster on top of these machines. We ran Oracle RAC. We had a customized version of SAP running on top to deliver this incredible insurance experience. So we worked for 3 years to build that platform. We spent £15 million building it out. And this was back in the day when pounds were worth something. There will be many Brexit jokes. So this was when pounds were worth something. So we had, because of that, and obviously this was a big complex project involving, just on the IT services team, hundreds of people, we used a Gantt chart to manage it. Now, if you haven't seen a Gantt chart before, they look like this. They start at the top left with unrealistic expectations, and they usually end about here with everybody losing their job. Now, has anyone here, I'm sure you've seen Gantt charts before, has anyone ever been to the end of a Gantt chart? Oh, wow. That's amazing. I've never been there. Now, I hear it's full of unicorns and rainbows and amazing things happening, but I can't prove it because I've never been there. So, what happened on this project was we worked, we delivered. We didn't deliver precisely to the Gantt chart, which, by the way, it was a thing of beauty. It was for over 100 people to a 15-minute granularity for 3 years. You could print it out and put it around the walls. It was utterly incredible. We didn't deliver precisely to that, but we delivered just about on time, just about on budget. We were all very proud of ourselves. The project went live. This is awesome. The whole thing was scrapped within a month. It was a terrible idea, absolute waste of money, people's time. I'm angry about this. I want my 3 years back. So I don't want that to happen ever again to anyone. So this high latency ticket system thinking, this is a bad idea. We want to get services delivered quickly to lines of business so they can find out if their ideas are a good idea or a bad idea. But this interaction isn't just tickets. There are other aspects where this collaboration fails to take place, and it looks more kind of unidirectional, one way. Because this interaction also happens with software. Code is thrown over the wall from the people writing the code to people in IT services to operate the code. So quite often this looks like a project mentality, where the line of business are working on a software project, and then they finish it, and it's signed off, and it's thrown over the wall to the people to operate it. Now, again, this happened to me. I was working on a big project. Well, it wasn't huge, nothing the size of the insurance company thing. It was for an online multiplayer game. We were trying to deliver a game called Monopoly City Streets. Have any of you heard of Monopoly City Streets? Okay, a few people. Okay, so this was about 10 years ago. This was planned to be a small online game to sell a new version of Monopoly. I'm going to ask a stupid question now. Who's played Monopoly? Okay, so now we see who's willing to raise their hands in the audience. Thank you. So this was to sell a new version of Monopoly. Now, the thinking was on the project team, we would receive approximately 20,000 players, evenly distributed over the course of the 3-month period of the game. Because as we all know, the internet loves evenly distributing load. So we built 4 small servers to deal with this load. The developers were happily writing the code. This was great. We got towards the launch date, and the developers had finished their code, threw it over the wall to me in operations. This is my problem now. And as I mentioned, this is going to be a small 3-month project to sell a new version of Monopoly. Now, the sting actually is in the tail here, because this online version of Monopoly was actually pretty cool. What they did was they took the entire world, they used OpenStreetMap data for the entire world, and made it massively multiplayer such that every person could play. They could buy any street in the world and build on those streets. So it's everyone versus everyone in a worldwide game of Monopoly. That sounds kind of cool, doesn't it? Free to enter, awesome. You're thinking, I'm going to play that. I would play that. Would you play that if you won, your rent or mortgage would be paid for the year? Yeah, lots of nodding. Awesome. Remember, project specifications, approximately 20,000 people, evenly distributed over the course of 3 months. So we have a nice holding page hosted by a CDN. Everything's going great. We're about to launch. We launch, lots of PR, lots of in fact, the PR budget exceeded the technical budget by about 10 to 1, by the way. Just a little note. So we launch, it's great, but at the moment of launch, when we flick the thing on, everything goes offline. Literally everything stopped completely. So I'm like, oh, this is bad. So what could possibly have happened? Well, this happened. This is from Marketing Magazine, which some of you may have heard of and may have read. Hasbro's Monopoly Play in meltdown as 1.7 million people fail to access game. So it was more than just a little bit popular. So I'm trying to run this game. It's all offline, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to make this thing work? So I call the developer, who obviously is in a different building to me, because you want to keep your developers well away from your operators. I call the developer up. Phone rings for a long time, then somebody else answers the phone. And I'm like, can I speak to the lead developer of Monopoly City Streets? Because we've got a bit of a problem here. The person said, no, you can't. They've gone for a long run, and they said they're not coming back. And they didn't come back. So this is from PC Magazine. 1.7 million people try to access Monopoly City Streets. Attracting 1.7 million people to a site in a month isn't bad. Luring them all there in a single day, superlative. But failing to add the server capacity to allow them to actually view the page, well, as the kids say these days, fail. So I'm sitting there. I've got an app that I know is tremendously popular. It doesn't work. I have no developers to help me out. Bit of a problem. So I worked a 54-hour shift without leaving the office to try and make this work. People brought me food, brought me drinks. I sat at a console and just tried to fix the whole thing. I installed and configured over 400 web servers. I installed and configured a 64-node sharded MySQL cluster and a 256-node in-memory Memcached grid to try and get this thing to work. And during that time period, I wrote an object relational mapper in PHP. It's good fun. So I've given a few conference talks about how much I dislike PHP, and I got some kickback on that. People are saying you shouldn't do that because some people have their identity tied to languages, and it's a bad thing to kind of badmouth languages. What I can say to you, if you've ever had to try and write a PHP object relational mapper while a couple of million people are trying to access a game, and you can't work out if for the precise version of PHP you're using, if false in quotes is true or false, then you would hate PHP as much as I hate PHP. So this was an epic failure, as we see. By the way, this is just after the 10-year anniversary of this happening. This is 9th of September 2009 when all of this happened. But actually, when we got it running after like 2 and a bit days, this was a tremendous success. We actually topped out at just over 3 million players, and this was the most popular online game in the world at that point in time. So it did end up being a tremendous success, but I think with a bit more collaboration, we could have not had all these embarrassing stories that you see up here. So Let's recap. Throwing tickets between the line of business and the IT services team is clearly a bad way to work. Throwing code between the lines of business and the IT services team is clearly a bad way to work. Now, we know that the IT services team do want to provide great services quickly, secure services to the line of business. And we know the line of business want to quickly and securely deliver value. So this begs the question, how can we do better? And to answer that question, I'm going to invite Paula to talk to you all.
Thanks very much. I think we've learnt from that section of the talk not to hire Colin to do anything. Anyway, so Colin's talked about the bad old days. Some of you might still have some of those experiences, but let's talk a bit about what we think of today as best practices and how can we do things just a little bit better than the way Colin described it. So at Pivotal, we work with customers to build software. We've been doing that for 30 years, and we've learned a lot. So we have learned lessons from how our customers do things, and we've distilled our learnings and knowledge really into one kind of little sentence, which we talk about as platform as a product. So what does that actually mean? You might hear us saying it a lot. You might have heard on stage yesterday, one of the panelists on the last panel of yesterday's talk actually said platform as a product, to which I was going to do a little woo, but I was too British to do that. So what does it mean? It actually means that we're trying to treat our application teams as our customers. So the point of the platform is to enable the developers. So you need to understand their needs. You need to put them at the heart of everything that you do and build the thing that they want. You can't do field of dreams development. You can't take the approach of build it and they will come. You need to put them at the heart of what you're doing. But how do we do this? Pivotal has a set of practices that we apply when we're building software and that we apply when we're building platforms. Let's start with the building itself. We need to consider, can we build this platform? Can we make it secure? Can we make it reliable? And how will we engineer it? What practices of engineering will we actually apply? And if we do build it, will people actually use it? Will we give them a good user experience? Will they like using it? Or will they hate it? And will they go somewhere else? Shadow IT is a real thing. They might find an easier way and go do something else instead. And even if we build it, and they quite like it, is it actually delivering the outcomes that the business needs? Will there be value created by you building this platform? And if we can find the sweet spot for all of these practices, then you know you're building the right thing. So what I want to do is dive a little bit deeper into these three topics. If we start by talking about the engineering, at Pivotal, we practice extreme programming. That's the flavor of Agile that we really practice. This includes core values such as simplicity and communication and feedback. And those values really manifest themselves in practices. So test-driven development, fast feedback loops, pair programming. We are also exploring more and more how to apply SOE practices into our engineering. How many people here have read the SOE books from Google, started thinking about some of them? Okay, a few people. So there was a great talk that was delivered yesterday by two of my team, where they talked about questions to ask your developers and how to apply SOE practices. So if you didn't manage to catch that talk, then you should look it up when it comes out on YouTube. But basically, SOE is about how to have a contract between your app team and your platform team, how to agree the level of availability that your platform will have, how to have an error budget. So how you can use a small window to make features, to take risks. Like I say, there's lots of information about it. It's a practice that came out from Google, and there's books that you can read or talks that you can watch. Let's move on. So user-centered design. As mentioned yesterday, again, Niall Sheehan of General Motors gave a great keynote yesterday talking about putting the user at the center of everything that they do. And it's really, really important. You need to understand the personas who's going to use your platform, understand their needs, understand their behaviors, map out the journey. So what's the path to production for the code that they're writing? What are their pain points? And how can you, as the platform team, help to solve those pain points? You need to try to minimize that friction for the code getting from the hands of the developers into production. And we talk a lot at Pivotal about agile and lean practices. It's about building the minimum thing to understand if it's the right thing. The last thing you want to do is the experience that Colin described earlier, where he spent 3 years building a platform, spent millions of pounds building it, released it, and then it turned out that it didn't do at all the thing that the developers actually needed. Like, what a waste of time, what a waste of money. So you want to build the minimum viable thing that you can, and then test it, and then figure out what's the next thing to build, and then build that. So, I've talked a bit about the theory and the practices, but you need the people to do the actual work. You need to have a think about your team and what your team should look like. So we have 3 separate roles that we think about as part of a balanced team at Pivotal. They may not for you be separate people. You might have a person that's doing more than one role, but there's 3 parts to this. The platform champion or product owner, or in Scrum you might think of that as the product manager. The product manager, who's the person who's applying this kind of product mindset. And then the platform engineers themselves, the people who are in the team building and running the platform. So I'm going to describe a little bit more about the characteristics of these people that you should ideally have in your balanced team. So the platform champion needs to be somebody who has political capital within your organization, who can really support and empower the platform team. It's somebody who can unblock if they're stuck. It's somebody who can evangelize the product and go out and talk within the business about how great this internal platform is. It's typically someone that's quite senior within the organization who can really, like I say, support that team. It may be someone who's running more than one part of the organization, but it's someone who can really help drive the success of the platform. And the next is the product manager. So I talked a bit about the product mindset. Essentially what you need is a product manager on your platform team who is dedicated and full-time. It's their full-time job to be defining the product strategy, to be validating assumptions, to be testing, and using the data that they derive to drive the decisions, to manage the backlog, to make sure that you're doing the next right thing. And then the platform engineers themselves. So again, one of the panelists yesterday talked about having a balanced team of engineers. Now this, for us, looks like people with different characteristics. We look for people who like to write code. If we think that site reliability engineering practice is about treating operations as software, then you need people in your ops team who like writing code, who like doing software. It's also good to have people that like to automate. So another part of the SRE practice is about automating toil, reducing the manual tasks. Again, on the panel yesterday, they talked about automate, automate, automate. Like, the more you can automate, the better. So having people that really hate doing the repetitive manual stuff will naturally make them want to automate. And also maybe people that are curious. So folks that want to learn, that want to improve all the time, having people with that mindset in the team is fantastic to really round out the team that you have. So, you've got the people, you've got all the buzzwords, now what are you going to do? I'm going to talk through some actual practical things that your team should do when they're starting on this journey to build the platform. So step number 1, understanding user needs. So going back to the topic of having your user at the heart of everything that you do, you should just go and talk to your users. Colin mentioned about his developer team was in a whole separate other building. Like, unless it was like 100 miles away, you could have just gone over and walked and talked to them. It's good to have your users really as part of the journey from day one. For anyone that's ever worked with Pivotal and done a platform dojo, which is the way that we go on site to customers and help them kind of get started, we would typically start with an inception meeting. And in that inception meeting, what we like to do is have the the team that's building that first application that's going to land on the platform, have those people in the room and do the journey map. So ask them to with a whole bunch of stickies, to go from, you've got an idea, how do you get that idea into the hands of the customers? What are all the steps along the journey? And then understand the pain, understand what they need, and then start to define what that system's going to look like, because you've understood the needs from the beginning. And once you have understood that, once you've carried out user interviews, and you've really understood what your users want, then define your product vision. This platform is going to be your product. You need to understand what the vision for that product is and set your goals at the beginning. And then create the backlog. So understand all the stories and epics that you need to have, prioritize them, and then create that backlog ready to start. And then get started. Use the engineering practices that I described. Pair programming is something Pivotal really believes in. It's a way to reduce knowledge silos. It's a way to have higher quality code. So you start the build. And once you've built something, measure it as quickly as you can. One of the practices that we encourage strongly at Pivotal is to do demos with your users. So build something and then show it to someone as early as you can. Because if it's just you sitting there building, you'll end up in a situation like Colin had, where you're building a thing and you think it's great, but you can't tell if it's great. So once you've shown it to somebody, once you've gathered that feedback, then you can use that feedback to reprioritize your backlog, have another look, and make sure that the next thing that you're going to work on is the right thing to do, that it's the next most urgent thing, and that's the thing you're going to do. And then that build, measure, learn cycle, you just go round and around again. So at Pivotal, we tend to do 1 week iterations. We'll start at the beginning with a planning meeting. We'll work for the week. We'll do a demo. We'll learn. We replan again. We go around again. So what's next? The things I just described are more kind of like getting started day one type of practices, but your platform is long-lived. So you need to keep thinking about other things to do. So I mentioned site reliability engineering. The starting point for this really is to define what your service level objective is going to be. Understand what level of reliability you want to offer. Understand, is it 3 nines? Is it 4 nines? But also really understand what that means. There's a way to think about the availability in terms of minutes instead of nines. And it's not always realistic to go for 100% availability. And each 9 that you add is costing more and more money. So really understand what you want to do and maybe set it a little bit lower to begin with. Give yourself time, if you're building this platform, to have time to be able to make more changes and to iterate. Another part of site reliability engineering practice is, we mentioned automation. So you want to automate as much as possible. The more you can automate from the start, the better. It's particularly going to help you when you're having to do patches, when you're doing upgrades. The more things that you can do that are automated, the better the platform will be. Another great thing to think about is how you can, as a platform team, push more and more work to the developers themselves. If you can give them a self-service portal or APIs, then you give them the work. You don't have to do all the things. Colin talked about tickets between the IT services and the line of business. But if a developer doesn't need to write a ticket and then wait for some time for that ticket to be answered, if they can help themselves to the things that they need, they're going to go faster, they're going to be happier, and you as the platform team are going to have less work to do because you've pushed it all to the developers. Another key thing, reducing friction with the kind of other areas of the business. So we all know that whatever you're building, you're not doing it in isolation. Pivotal works with lots of customers that are in highly regulated environments. We work with government, we work with banks, financial services. There are other things that you have to consider. So even if you've built the best application in the world and you've got the best platform in the world, there are still steps along the journey that are on that path to production that you can't control. It could be compliance, it could be security, but the more that you can build that in from day one, the better that's going to be for the whole organization. So when we do an inception meeting, we might ask our customers to bring people from those teams into the room. Let's understand what the gates are to get to production. And let's try to figure out how many of those things can we actually build into the platform itself. How many checkboxes can we remove because we know that the platform is going to take care of them? And when you have that, that means your path to production is faster and code is getting out to the users much more quickly. Provide a delightful experience is my favorite thing to think about. So, as I mentioned, you want people to use your platform. You've spent some time building it. It's your job, it's your baby, you love it, and you want people to actually use it. You want workloads to land on that platform and for people to tell you how great it is. So you need to think about the design of the platform. It was mentioned again in one of the talks yesterday, someone talked about having a designer actually as part of the team to help make sure that it's nice to use. If your developers can go somewhere else and it's quicker, easier, faster, then you've got a very hard job trying to convince them to come and use your platform. So make it a lovely user experience for them. One way to really encourage teams to come use your platform is market it. Market it like a product. Come up with a name for your platform. Come up with a logo, do some branding. You can create t-shirts, you can create stickers. I mean, everybody loves stickers, right? If you're running around your organization giving out stickers with a cool logo on, people are going to be curious. There's going to be buzz within your organization of how to use that platform. Like, how do I get my apps on there? And that will then drive the usage of the platform. And it's also interesting to think about, this isn't really just a day one thing. This isn't build it and it's amazing and people start using it, because human nature says that we all have kind of short attention spans, right? You need to continually market it. You need to come up with the next feature that the developers want, the next cool thing that they want, so that they are continually excited to use the platform. It's not just once and done, it's an ongoing activity. So when we do all these things, what does the outcome look like? What you want to end up with is the application teams are enabled. There was a lot of conversation I've heard this week about developer enablement. You want those application teams who are being enabled by your platform. The app teams should be able to get their code to their customers as quickly as possible, and you as the platform team are making that as smooth, as fun, as easy as it possibly can be. But it shouldn't look like this. It shouldn't look like the way Colin described earlier, where you've got this hard silo, developers are writing the code, throwing it over the wall to the ops, and then the ops team are trying to run it. It should look like this. So this is a slide that came from a talk that Cornelia Davis gave at VMworld. It should be the case that everybody's doing dev and everybody's doing ops. Your application teams are writing the code, they're writing the applications, but they're also running them themselves because you've given them the automation they need, the access that they need to be able to run the apps really, really well. And as a platform team, you're not just running the platform because you are trying to build that platform to have all of the features, all of the tooling that the application developers need. So the app teams are building and running, and the platform team is building and running. So it's really DevOps, up and down, all the way up and down. So how do we know this is working? As I mentioned at the beginning, we work with lots of customers and we see our customers' success stories. This is the 5 S's. There's a framework we use at Pivotal. I don't know if any of you've seen or heard it before, but it's a way that we try to measure success. So what we've seen is when customers are applying these practices, and maybe not all, but like making steps on their journey to do as much of these things as they can, they see success in these 5 S's. So we talk about the platform being more secure, being scalable, you're able to have more stability and reliability, you can go faster and save money. So these are just some of our customer stories. I really liked the keynote yesterday that Barbara Sanders gave from the Home Depot. She described that since running the platform, they've had 0 Sev1s this year because they're applying these practices and being really successful. And there's been loads of great talks this week on similar topics. So hopefully you've been able to see some of them. I picked out just a few that are related, but if you missed some of these talks, then you can catch them when they're all out on YouTube. And it's not just Pivotal and it's not just our customers that are talking about these things. If I haven't yet convinced you that these are the right things, then maybe hearing from other people in our industry might encourage you. So this was an article that came out last year from ThoughtWorks, and they're saying the same things. They're talking about having a long-lived team to run the platform. It's not a project, it's a product. And doing internal consulting to actually drive the value of the platform within the business. And even Gartner is saying the same thing. So this came out from a Gartner conference last year where they are talking about the same things. So we're starting to see that this platform as a product mindset is making its way outside of just Pivotal and our customers, and it's really spreading. So what does it look like when things are going better? What does it look like when you haven't got Colin working for you? It looks a bit better. So what you want to end up with is you've got the IT services team are so happy because people are using their platform, right? They've got workloads coming on there, they've got a queue of apps wanting to land on there, and it makes them happy. And then for your application teams in the lines of business, they're happy because they know that they can use the platform, it does what they need it to, they can get their own access to it, they can start deploying code to it, and everybody's happy. So that's what we think of right now as our current best practices. I'm now going to hand you back to Colin, who hopefully is not going to give us more doom and gloom stories of the future.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Paula. So for a quick recap, I stood up here for the first section. I confessed to all my sins and told you how not to do things. Paula's just covered the awesome content, reflecting back what Pivotal customers are doing in terms of building their platform as a product teams and the platform products that are helping them be successful. But the next section here about the future is essentially our attempts to form some ideas about what next steps might be. So I appreciate there's many Pivotal customers in this room, and if you're thinking, I'm already doing all of those things, I'm already doing platform as a product, it's working well for me, but I want to take it to the next level, here are some ideas for you for things to try out. And I had some great conversations with customers over the course of this conference so far, and they've been having some wonderful ideas, and they're testing out new things, and obviously if those ideas work out well, I'll be passing them off as my own at future conferences. So this is like the bonus points section. Let's have a look through this. So the question here is, what would happen if we took platform as a product to the extreme? Now, Paula mentioned extreme programming, being the flavor of Agile that we practice at Pivotal. The concept behind that is to retrospect on the work that you're doing, think what works and what doesn't work, and for the things that work, to take them to the next level, to turn them to 11, as Spartak would say, to take them to the extreme. So these are the ideas that we've been percolating on, thinking about taking these things to the extreme in terms of platform as a product. But for each of these, and I'm going to subdivide them into 3 categories of build, measure, and learn. For each of them, they are just hypotheses of things that could take us further forward. And for each of them, we should be trying them out, measuring their impact, and then learning about them. So the meta call to action here is, for your platform product, how can you build, measure, and learn more quickly? How can you deliver smaller batches and faster feedback about your platform product so you can iterate more quickly towards a better product? Let's start with the first set around building out that platform product. Firstly, as Paula mentioned, we're taking these practices on board. We are thinking about our infrastructure as code. And infrastructure as code is not a new concept. It's at least kind of like 10, 15 years old. If we're thinking about infrastructure as code, think about the next level of that. What about infrastructure as good code? What about infrastructure as clean code? What would happen if we test drove our infrastructure? Because lots of infrastructure as code right now looks like walls and walls of untested YAML. Configuration management tools, which Chef, Puppet, Ansible, SaltStack, CF Engine, there's a huge number of them. Walls and walls of kind of like not great quality code that I've seen, that I've personally written in those tools. What if we took that and took a more test-driven approach? What if we had those tests that define good behaviors for our infrastructure? What would happen if we then reused those in our monitoring to continuously monitor the platform? Because we know what behavior we're expecting from it, so we can reuse those tests for monitoring. What about the notion of, again, continuous delivery? What would happen if, for any change to any component in our running system, such as the kernel, the stem cell, build packs, anything of that nature, what would it look like if we had an integration pipeline sufficiently advanced that any of those components could change, and if that change was tested to be known good, we could assert with confidence that it is secure, that it delivers the performance we need, that it would flow straight through into production. So we have continuous delivery for the entire platform. How would that look? So yeah, that would look good. Sorry, many rhetorical questions today. That would look good. So that, again, would be, I think, an awesome thing to do in terms of taking steps forward. And then lastly, and this is real, very advanced bonus points, what would it look like if, for the entire platform product, we were able to progressively deploy the system? Now, by that I mean, I think we're all becoming aware of concepts like canary deployment, A/B testing, max in-flight deployments, these kind of things. What would it look like if we had that for the platform? So we would maybe blue-green deploy the platform itself and put a small amount of traffic over to the new version of the platform and see if it's working well. What if we had a platform that was continuously being updated? So you always had A, B, C, D testing, new features being added, feature flags, shadow deployments, these kind of things. So if we brought those concepts, which we're now becoming more familiar with at the application level, to the platform, because they're all about building a better platform product. So I've experimented with some of these things, but I'd love to be able to talk to and work with customers who want to take that next step forward. So that's the build part. Let's have a little think about measuring the progress that we're making. So firstly, I think I had an email about 2 weeks ago from a customer where their platform team have been using Net Promoter Score to think about whether or not their platform is getting better. So actually working with the application teams and getting their feedback and seeing who is promoting the platform and using that as a metric for their own success. Because those teams are their customers. Also, looking at the platform and understanding who is consuming what, how are they consuming it, really understanding the consumption patterns. If it's a product, we should know which bits are being effective, which bits aren't being effective, and we should use that feedback and that knowledge to invest heavily in the things that are being used, and maybe reduce our investment in things that aren't. For the platform itself, now Paula spoke about SRE concepts, and we're seeing those being employed very effectively with our customers. But what would happen if you had a platform that was reflective about its own service level objectives and availability, such that I, as a customer, on an application team coming to the platform, I can see which services on the platform deliver which level of availability and have done for the past month. So I can see, for example, the Postgres service maybe had some issues last month. The MySQL service is more stable. I'll use the MySQL service because I know it delivers a better level of availability. Like, what would it look like if your platform could actually radiate out information about its service levels? And lastly, and by no means least in terms of data, how many of you here working on platform teams know with confidence whether or not your platform is making money or losing money? Like, can you actually accurately measure profit and loss for your platform? Because if it's a product, shouldn't we be doing that? Could we think about that? Okay, last category. For learning here, I think about learning in terms of agility, actually benefiting from the data that we're capturing. What kind of decisions should we be making? And one of the first decisions I'd love to see more platform teams look at is feature pruning. So I spoke to a customer a few weeks ago, lovely customer, wonderful to work with. Everything that Pivotal produce, they add to their platform. every single thing we make. It's awesome. I love the loyalty, great conversation. But I did suggest, have you considered thinking about how those things are being consumed, thinking about how your application teams want to work, and investing your focus and your effort onto the areas and the features that are most productive for your teams? And maybe taking away some of the features that you're having to maintain, you're having to keep up to date, where people aren't using them. Because I think developing any good product is not about how many features you can pile on. It's actually about focusing on the parts of the product that really solve your users' needs. So next up, to continue, deeper customer understanding. So I put design in brackets here. Paula mentioned this, but I want to double down on this concept that I don't see enough design thinking and good design work on platform teams. And I don't think that's anybody's fault. I'm not trying to blame anyone. I don't have a background in design. I feel like an imposter whenever I'm talking about design. As we've already covered, my background is in breaking large web systems. I think it's a concept that as we start to take more of this product mentality into our platform teams, so bringing designers into the team, making them feel welcome and cherishing what they bring to us is going to be a massive step forward. Because this is where we can start to have really impactful conversations about what are the actual deeper needs of the application teams, our customers. What are they really trying to achieve? And could we add higher level abstractions to the platform that make their lives much, much easier, rather than just kind of throwing more and more and more containers in there? And lastly here, again around learning, as you start to show success on your platform, as you start to build out your platform product, many of our customers talk to us about what does it look like to scale a platform team? As you start to, do you just throw more and more and more people into one team? Can I put 200 engineers on my one platform team? Now that's actually shown many challenges in our customers when you start to take an XP-orientated team and bring a number of engineers north of kind of like 10, 12 level. So the recommendation that we've been making, and we've seen it successful in some small pockets, is take the user interface, the services that you actually offer to the application teams, take that and slice that and subdivide it between your teams. So an example would be, when you reach a certain scale on your platform team, think about dividing the team into two, having one team focused on the kind of the platform, the core marketplace, and maybe the stateless services that are offered, and then have another team focused on the stateful services, so your data stores. So dividing that user kind of focused aspect between the teams so that each sub-platform team owns their own part of the user experience and is responsible for it. Again, dividing between development and operations, having a platform development team and a platform operations team, is going back to that old pattern of throwing code over the wall from development to operations. So allow each team to write, run, and own their part of the user experience. So, in summary for all of these things, I would invite you to try out these ideas, consider them for the future of your platform team, but with each of them, test them out, measure their impact, and then learn from that, and then iterate again. So thank you very much. That's it for our content. There are some links here. I noticed many of you have been taking pictures throughout the talk. These slides will be made available online, so I appreciate you're taking pictures because I'm so fantastically good looking, and I appreciate that. So I thank you very much. So these are some of the content that's available. Again, these links will be available. The top link there, by a white paper a while back by myself and Joe Fitzgerald on platform as a product. Obviously, it's not for me to say that I invented this concept. That's for other people to say. Wouldn't dream of saying it. Great talk there from Cornelia Davis, who's mentioned, is a wonderful evangelist of these kind of ideas, and some other links there. So that's it for us. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate your time. Sure. Let's do some questions. Why not? Any questions? I see a hand raised over there. Awesome. Would you like to do that? I think I heard it.
Yeah.
Obviously, for the recording, I'll try and reflect back the question, if that's okay, and you can tell me if I heard this right. So the question, as I understood it, was, with this kind of balanced XP team, you've got a mix of effectively requirements on the team. There are development-focused requirements in terms of taking the platform forward, but there are also operational requirements which you don't really have a choice about when they crop up, because the platform could break, the platform could have issues. So how do you construct that team such that you can deal with those two sets of work so they can do development and operations? Is that? Awesome. Thank you. So again, just for the rest of the audience, if I'm working in the Scrum model with a sprint and I've got some ops stories and some dev stories that I've allocated to this sprint, obviously if things break, how do you then deal with the fact that more operational stuff has kind of emerged and maybe you won't be able to fulfill your sprint? How much time have we got? Right, so let's peel this back a little bit, if I possibly may. Thank you very much for the question. This is an awesome question. You have touched on a few topics here. I'm sorry if I'm going to rant, maybe I'll have a go. The first one, I don't like Scrum. Straight up, this is my, thank you, you've very well highlighted the exact disagreement I have with Scrum, because with Scrum you make a commitment for an iteration, you say we're going to do these things in this iteration, you do everything you can do to get those things done in that iteration. We practice extreme programming, and I mean, if you look at something like Pivotal Tracker, which is the tool that we've developed to help you with extreme programming, it has emergent velocity. So the work that gets done inside of an iteration is the work that gets done. And if there's lots and lots of operational work, Tracker will predict your velocity based upon that and will say, you're doing loads of operational work, you're not making any forward progress, your velocity is 0. And that's true because your velocity is 0. So one of my issues with Scrum, I mean, Scrum is a good starter into Agile, I think, but it's not really for, it's got some issues such as this commitment, I think, and trying to predict the future and say there will be no interrupting operational work on the team, therefore we commit to doing this work over the next 2 weeks, I think is a major problem with Scrum. If you take it a different way and instead you say, for the next iteration, we're going to hope to accomplish maybe like 5 story points of work. And that's based upon like last week's weather, because last week, we did 5 story points of work and that's the best indicator. But whatever happens, happens because you can't predict the future. So if you take that approach, then you aren't going to violate a commitment by saying things are going to happen, in terms of saying we must get these things done. Then you start to think about patterns for optimizing for that work. So we tend to look at patterns like having an interruptible pair on the team. So each day you would have a pair, and their responsibility is to deal with anything that needs to interrupt the team, such as production's broken. These things do happen. Maybe I'm on the team breaking production, so therefore we need to have an interruptible pair to take care of the mess that I'm causing. So you have that, and they would start it. And if they need to bring in more pairs, they would keep going, because obviously keeping production working is the key thing. So they would bring in more pairs as they need to. And you typically have some kind of a token system whereby, on teams that I've been on, you might have some kind of we had a crown, and basically this crown and scepter were being held by the interruptible pair, so everyone knew where to go if there was some kind of an issue. And that team, that pair, they know they're going to get interrupted by any kind of the operational work you're talking about, and they also, so they have the authority to go and bring in more and more people as they need to. So that team could be, largely focused on development work, taking the platform forward, like future, enhancing the platform, and then as they need to, they are bringing more and more people onto the operational side to take care of things as they happen. And then you go into things like having a pager rotation, using kind of like, actually looking after the platform 24/7, those kind of things. I think you may need to enhance, you need a decent sized team. You need at least kind of like 4 pairs of engineers before you start going to a rotation. But these kind of patterns where you always have a interruptible, more operationally focused pair that's rotated on a daily basis, but they can eat up more and more of the team's capacity as they need to, we've seen that to be effective.
That was a long answer.
It was. It's a great question. Thank you. I may give a conference talk, the next conference, just on that question. Awesome. Any more questions?
great question. So the question was, how do we actually get more information about the profit and loss of the platform and whether it's costing the business compared to legacy systems? So that's a great question. Like Colin described, we've started thinking about this with some customers, but the sort of way of measuring, you're going to need to bring other people in to help figure out like actual costs, bringing someone in to come and have a look at all the different pieces that you're using, trying to measure sort of specifics, and then it's tying it back to the application teams as well. So the profit side of how much is that application generating from your end customers? So there's a lot of figuring out to do. Colin described it in our future section because it's not something we have done very much of either. The best thing is start, I guess. We always say start small and iterate. So try an experiment. Actually try looking at a couple of the applications running on the platform, get some numbers. Once you have a baseline, then you can measure improvement as well. So there's not an easy answer. I mean, it's not like we have heaps of experience of doing it.
Yeah, I've spoken to customers who are doing this. What I don't have is their authority to speak about that in public. So maybe we can talk offline, and I can try and connect you with those customers. But I want to get their authority first before I just say, oh, customer X is doing this kind of thing with their accounting, because that feels unfair on them, and I wouldn't want to do that without, I say, having their explicit permission to talk about how they're thinking about their business models. But maybe if we talk afterwards, I can try and connect you with them, and then you can have that conversation.
Cool.
Any more?
We're probably out of time.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you all so much.